Hi, welcome to the Key2Act job cost quoting and estimating presentation. This presentation is going to review the various elements of creating an estimate or a quote for a home design or a home construction, and it'll take you through a very high level review or overview, looking through the various construction units or assemblies, looking through some examples of copying in some templates or model homes and making some subtle small changes to some of the options. There's a lot of detail that we could get into that would require some more specific review and understanding of various processes. So again, this is designed to be a bit of a high level overview, and happy to get into more detail at a future date. So first thing to note is that this particular module, it's called Quadra, but it is web-based, and the idea of it being web-based is that it's really accessible from anywhere, and a lot of remote users will use the application. You can use it on any device that supports a browser, so whether it's a tablet or a kiosk, any sort of thing like that, it can be used. So I'm just going to log in, and all of the UI itself is very, it's all typical browser functionality. So I can just key something in, and it'll automatically do a search ahead for me and pulls up a record. So I'm looking at this particular quote that was done, and I can see the details from the quote. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger so everyone can see, hopefully. And so there we go. So I can see the details. I can see that this is the estimated cost. So far, there's been no costs charged to this. I can see what we sold it, or what we quoted it for, was 1.8 million. Our estimated costs are 1.4. I can see that this is the estimate that we won. Here's one for change orders, and then here's one that's going to be looking at options for an upgraded kitchen, and all of these can be sort of sub estimates to this main estimate, and allow you to do things like track change orders, or to look at different options that might exist on a particular quote, or hey, the customer wants a quote with the upgraded kitchen and without, and they'll decide if they want to include the upgraded kitchen. So it's very easy to create multiple quotes, multiple versions of the same quote. And you'll see all the things like if I go in and I can look at a particular quote itself, and I can see all the details, all of the items that are on that particular on this particular quote itself, and I can look at the workflow and see the details and say, oh, okay, here's the customer quote. I can click on that. I can click and say, hey, yeah, here's the signed purchase agreement. There it is. So we're tracking that. So it's got all of the project tracking and workflow that you'd typically require for managing the jobs from the initial receipt of the quote, much like a CRM system, through to closing the project. And the nice part about having this tasking and set up with prerequisites and alerts and assigned to users and sort of assigning some planning dates, is that you can then run some reports, which I'll show you later on, to manage your tens of hundreds of concurrent projects, construction projects that you'll have on the go at any given time. You'll need to be able to track and monitor, hey, when is construction starting? And you'll probably have a much more detailed tasking list that maybe breaks down rough in versus finish. Maybe you're going to do and something's along the lines of identifying the various trades and when they're going to be going in. I'm not sure how your business is managed, but it gives you 100% flexibility to create and manage, add these tasks, and determine how you want to manage the workflow. So what I want to do now is just sort of show you an example of how I could go ahead and pretend we're going to get a new quote that's going to come in, a request for a quote that's going to come in, and I need to build out this estimate. So I'm going to go in and create my quote now, and I first want to highlight this particular form here. It gives me a lot of options. I can go through and pick out, this is going to be, let's say, some sort of condo. I pick out the division within my organization that's going to be doing, and I'll pick out my template, and I'll identify the template, and I'll say that this is going to be the Ross house on Main Street. And, it's got pulled in who the customer is. I could change this customer, Beaumont Construction, or what I can do is I can add a sub address or a secondary address. So let's call this one the Ross main address. Contact is going to be Todd Ross. The address is going to be 143 Main Street and Palm Springs. California, and I have no idea what the postal code is. So what it's doing is it's creating this address that I can store against this particular customer record. And the other important thing to note too is that if it's a new request or a new customer, the customer itself isn't added to GP or the accounts receivable system, until finance does that. So this is really just, storing the information so that if it does get approved, assuming finance, approves the credit check and all that good stuff, that'll get done. So just at the bottom here, I've got this job request, and I've got create job. And, the subtlety here is that this part of the module of the Key2Act estimating tool really gives you the ability to track and manage all of the requests. So, you might quote 200 homes a year and only build 50. So you're going to have 150 jobs that are never go forward. And what you don't want to do is clutter the job cost system with all of those jobs that aren't actually happening. So that's the purpose of this module, is that it keeps track of all of those jobs before they become jobs. These are the quotes. So much like a CRM system is when you win the job, that's when it'll get approved, and we'll push it into Key2Act's job cost module at that time. So, this would allow me to go through and create the request, very manually. Another option is just to go ahead and copy a job. So what I can do is say, pretend that I have a model home. Here's the Joe Smith quote for Key2Act. So here, let's say this happened to be the model home. So I can update my cost codes, I can update costs, I can update bid prices. So I can go through and pull all those details in. And what it's going to do is it's going to load all of those details in. So this could be, for example, your model, and you're going to now go through and you're in a subdivision, you've got 5 models. You're going to now load that model and then just go through and do some customization. So that's just allowing me to very simply just say, hey, pick the model, now let's go through and create it. So it's going to pull all the details in from that particular job, so I don't have to put that stuff in again. You've gone through the effort of creating the model home and identifying all the various elements of it, so now let's just go ahead and pull the detail in. So it's pulled in all the detail for me, and this particular model has it's pulled in 2 different options. So here's the base model, and then here's some upgraded or changed items that are already built into this. So I'm just going to go ahead and focus on this one here, and we're going to call this one the Main Street Design, and then let's call. Let's just delete this one. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through and take a look at what's on this particular estimate. So we're going to go through and look at the various elements that we have. So here's all of the items that are on this particular model, and it's really broken it out. If I run a quick report here, I'll run this bill of materials example to show you. So it's got, it's broken it down. I'm grouping it by location. So, for the basement, here's the items that are on the particular basement. Here's the bathroom. Here's my bedroom, and here's the carpet, and all the other various items around. This just goes through room by room, and it's broken it out. So basically, that's the way we do our designs. Is we call them locations, but the locations have a lot of rich features to them. So I can go through and say, here's my roof structure, here's the second roof structure, here's the garage roof, here's the bedroom, kitchen, etc. And I can look at these various items, like this bedroom. Let's see what's in there. Great. So here's my carpeting, my baseboards, the doors, the drywall, etc. Those are the various items. And here's the units. So because these locations have dimensions to them, so I'm going to have a length and a width and a height and a pitch, etc. What it allows me to do is to automatically add based on those dimensions. So I can have a square foot dimension, I can have a linear foot dimension, I can have the square foot of a roof section, linear feet of exterior wall, linear feet of a mate wall, and a perimeter. So I can have all of those items. So when I go ahead and add or update or change these sizes, so for example, if I'm looking at bedroom 1 here, what we can see is, let me just close that for a second. So what we can see is the drywall for the ceilings here. I've got, so I've got 1,200 units of this drywall ceiling, and then I've got 1,200 of the hanging. So this is probably not a good example, because that's not how you typically would measure these units out, but I think you get the point. So I'm just going to go ahead, just to simplify things here, is just delete these 3. Delete that carpet, so I'll get rid of that. So delete those items, sure. So we've got 1,200 square feet of the drywall, and I've got 1,200 square feet of the cut pile carpet. So if I go back into managing my locations, if I look at bedroom 1, if I say, well, that room is actually going to be 50 by 30. Now 1,500 square feet. So what it's done is it'll automatically go back through. If I go back into, as you can now see that I've got 1,500 units. So the nice thing is as the dimensions of the room change, any one of these items that are set up to be configurable through that particular unit of measure, whether it's the roof height or the roof pitch, sorry, the square foot of the roof, square foot of a building, the perimeter of a room. If it's things like how much baseboard do I need, we can set those up to be a perimeter calculation. And so it allows me to make a lot of changes to these quotes very easily, and then and it lets me break it out sort of room by room. So that's letting me take an example of I've got my model home listed, and here's all the items on it, and you can sort of see the detail. I can see what the current costing is. So it's a 1.56 million. There's my margins, and here's all the various items. I can go through and say, hey, I want to add an item here. So I can go through and say, all right, I'm going to be adding, well, let's add a rooftop. Let's add an air conditioning unit here just to show you. So here's all the various categories, and you're seeing a lot of our demo data in here. Apologize for that. But I'm going to look at this particular item here and talk a little bit about some of the power of these our assemblies. Just to explain a little bit. So here's the assembly itself, and I can upload pictures, which is great for people who are trying to determine between one particular assembly unit or another. So in this case here, this is going to be a rooftop unit. Pretend this is a commercial building we're putting in, let's say, and it's identified a number of the elements that are required. So here's my various fittings, etc. And it's defaulting in this 2-ton rooftop unit. But because it's highlighted in pink and it's got a drop down, it's an optional item. And so what I can say is, hey, select no option, because that's we don't want a rooftop unit. I don't know why that would be, but I could also use a 3-ton unit. So if I select the 3-ton unit, what you'll notice is it's added these items in green. These items in green are what we call linked items. So these linked items are pulled in if I selected this 3-ton unit. If I go back and select the 2-ton unit, it's going to remove these items because it's determined it doesn't need those. So the great thing about that is it allows me to manage the number of these assemblies that I want to have. So for example, if I'm putting in a certain type of trussing system, I may need a crane, I may not need a crane, I may need 2 cranes. Whatever the situation is, you can identify and make sure those are included or excluded from your quote. So it puts the power back in the designer's hands to, as long as I go through the normal process, I'm going to make sure I don't forget something. Or if I pick this 3-ton unit, it's telling the designer or your estimator that, there's increased costs with that as well. And this is what you need, is you're going to need to make sure you rent this crane and you get a technician. So, I picked that particular item. I can assign it to a location. So let's say it's going to go on roof 1, and great. And I update that particular item. So I can go through and add items that I want. Now, what it's done here is it's actually highlighted these items. And so what these highlighted items mean is that there are additional attributes that are associated with this particular item. And if I look at this compression fitting here, let's see what this one says. So it's asking for the size. So is it 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1.5 inch? So I'll say it's 1.5 inch. And the compression type, is it male to female? So I'm just going to make sure that, hey, these are additional questions that are needed. So there's notes that could put in here. I could also put in a date that's required for the install. So those are just items. So what it's again doing is it's highlighting and telling your designers, etc., that, hey, there are additional items that you need to address. So in this case here, I'm looking at some doors. There's additional information. So let's look and see what's required with this particular door. And again, it's like, okay, what handle is the door? So it's going to be a right-hand door, and it's going to go through and say, hey, what height is the door? Oh, it's going to be 6 feet 9 inches. All through asking these questions. And what type? I'm going to go with wood doors. It could be, is it a hollow fill, etc. And great. So again, we try to make it such that if there's something that needs the attention, again, there's reporting as well that'll identify any items that do require or need to be tweaked before you can move forward with sending out a quote to a customer. You can import pricing from vendors. So if you sent something out to a vendor and said, hey, I need so-and-so, I need you to quote drywall for this particular house, you could send it out to 5 drywallers and they can send back pricing, and you can track those 4 or 5 or 6 different quotes, or one quote, wherever you wanted to do your comparisons. And there's other things that you can do as well. I mean, one of the nice things is, you can do and track adjustments to these your quotes. So for instance, let's just say that, this may not be a good example, but let's say we're looking at, I just want to look at all of my labor. So here's all of the labor, and let's say for the roof, so there's garage roof, roof 2. For all the roofing, let's just say that selecting these guys and go, okay, it's going to be in the winter, and so it's going to take a longer. So they've already got a 20% factor on some of these items, and that was part of what was pulled in when I built this model. They've already factored it. But what I can do is say, hey, I want to set the percent unit to be, it's going to be a 45% markup, not a 20% as we had before. It's going to be 45, because it's going to be, done, let's say, during the winter. So it's actually going to take longer. They need more time getting up and down the roof, etc., because of snow potentially. But that's allowing me to, change the default item, so I can actually see, what each one of my estimators has changed as a, just to reflect how accurate those things, those costing elements or changes are. And those could be done for not just labor; it could be done for material. It could be done for third-party trades. Anything that you want to change, go through and update. So that lets me get into making some of those tweaks. The other thing that you can change, which is common, is you've pulled in the model, and it's a simple example. We're going to look at something like the flooring, and what I want to do is say, hey, we're going to change out the baseboard. So currently they've got a 4-inch baseboard, and they're looking to save some cost potentially. So I'm going to go through and say, hey, you've got the 4-inch baseboard currently. It identifies saying it's only in bedroom 1. So select that and go to the 2-inch baseboard. So great, so I've done that, and I've swapped it out. So it says now every instance wherever there was 4-inch, it's now been changed to 2-inch. So if I go back in and look at my flooring, and baseboards. Now, and this, I mean, if you had this in every room and you wanted to change it out, you could have, updated and changed that out throughout the house. And can show you a quick example of that as well. Say that if I'm going to go through, I'll just add an item here. We'll add the baseboards. It's default cost codes right there. So I'm going to put 2-inch baseboards in, and we're going to put them in the bathroom. Bedroom 2. This should be set up as a perimeter one, but I don't have it set up that way for some reason. The kitchen, we'll put in this as well, just to give an example of how that would look. So it's just going to add those units. And now when I go back in and say we want to swap those out for 4-inch, let's say, it's going to be an upgrade, I'm going to go through and say, all right, I'm going to pick all of my let's look for baseboards here. So there, we'll pick 2-inch baseboards. And what you'll see or notice now is that it's identified that, hey, we've got that in all of these rooms. So if you said, hey, so for the bedrooms, I want to actually put in 4-inch baseboards, you can do that, and it just swapped it out and said change the baseboards throughout. And you can literally do that on any item. So I mean, if it's carpet, if it's flooring, if it's your trim packages, trim kits, if it's the exterior of the house, if you want to switch from vinyl to brick, or you want to change out all the windows and go with double hung versus single hung, you can easily change all of those items out using the swapping option. That's exactly, very specifically what it was designed for. So, you'll see now I've got my bid summary and things have changed a bit. We're up to 1.567. Here's my margins that are set, and I can go through and tweak these and say, hey, we're going to get a 20% margin on this is labor, material. We can only get a 20% margin there as well. And so, with our non-stock or sub trades, we get 29. Let's say that we get 30% on that. And it's just automatically recalculating. So this is now going to be 1.489. And so your sales guy says, actually, I need to sell that at 1.485 million. And it'll just automatically recalculate everything. So that's allowing me to go through and tweak and play with this pricing. Once I get to a point, I'm going to eventually be getting to the point where I actually want to produce some sort of a quote to send through to the customer. So how that process typically works is you're going to have this workflow, and in this case here we've got this big quote coming in. Maybe what we want to have in here are copies of the plan. So let's take a look and say let's choose some files and say here's the lakeside layout. So here's the main floor layout. I'm going to add that, and then I can also add here's the second floor layout, or first floor, and maybe I'll add a comment as well saying, hey, they are going with the Carling model. So those are items. So now Todd comes in to send out the quote. I can go in and say, all right, well, show me the files, and I can say, okay, here's the layout. Oh, okay, there's the layout, and I can see what's required, and here's the next floor. Great. Okay, I now know what I'm dealing with. I can also look at the comments on here and see what any and every comment was. So eventually that's kind of going to get completed, and so the triggering event is once this gets completed, I can see that the next task is to request pricing from vendors, which is assigned to Todd Ross. And so this particular task has now been completed. So the prerequisite task has been done. So what's going to happen is Todd Ross is going to get an email notification saying, hey, it's time to get the pricing from vendors if you're going to get quoting, let's say, for certain elements. But what's happened is, let me just show you real quick. So I just got this email that's saying, hey, the prerequisite task 14299 request pricing on the Ross main house, which is this one here, is ready basically for you to do. So now it's Todd Ross. If I'm the guy that's the purchasing guy who goes up and gets pricing, it's now time for me to go through and make that request and complete that. So I can say, all right, yeah, I did that, I got it, it's all done. Great. We can then set internal approval. So now we've got that this job is pretty much done, and it's now ready to send a customer quote out. We need to approve. Someone needs to approve the pricing. Again, some admin or sales manager could be notified that that this job is ready to go, and they could go through and actually go through and do the updating, and then the salesperson, whoever that gets assigned to, would then get notified that, all right, that everything's been approved. It's now time to go out and get the quote to the customer. So we can look and say, here's the agreement that we want to send out. Pretend this is the sign, the quote that would go out to the customer. And so let's say this is the quote for customer. Great. So I add that. So that gets added, and the salesperson's going to get notified. They can see that signed quote, but they're going to want to they're going to want to create that quote, and this is where we would go in and use the quote generator. So this is kind of the last step in the quoting process. Here's the, and this will say this is going to be example quote for Key2Act. Okay, so I create my quote. And this quoting tool, I mean, it can be designed to work any variety of different ways. Like you could have it, using an SSRS report, crystal reports. We don't really care. All the data is stored in a database, so it's easily acceptable. So you can either have a Word document that uses tags that we can populate, or these can be set up so that you can go through and manually build out your quote. Maybe you have different states that you're doing business in. They might have different form letters, etc. You might have different quote templates that go up depending on who the builder is. If you're subbing to a different builder, they may have a different quoting process. So that's just pulling in, and I can select any and all of those different elements, and so I've gone through and I'm picking the various elements that I want. And I get to the body section and say, hey, how do we want this body section to look? And I can say, hey, I want a very detailed, I need to send this out to this particular customer. Maybe the customer's in the subtrades, and what I can see is here, room by room, here's every item that's going in there. Great, that might be too much detail. If this is just going to an end customer and you want to show them something a little bit more straightforward, you can just say, hey, here's the total for labor, material, equipment, etc. Or it could be, maybe it's a different tax in Illinois, so you're going to format things differently to show them. So I can summarize it differently there. And then I've got this conclusion section, which is, maybe I'll have a legal, this is all the T's and C's that you're going to want to have. And great, and so there it is. I've got my, the framework built out, and now I just have to save and download this for printing. And by printing, I mean we're talking about you're going to send this to, out to, let's pull this up, just open up on a different screen. So yeah, you're going to send this, print this to PDF, do whatever you're going to do, and then save this against, that it's automatically saved against the job. So there's the details, there's all the legal T's and C's, and you would then, your salesperson, put it into a PDF, or maybe they're going to go and present it to the customer in person. I don't know what the process is, but that would be that process. And then so the idea here by managing the workflow is that it sort of all leads to wanting to manage different elements of the different projects. So in this case here, I'm building out this template, if you will, and I've got Todd's construction project, and I'm going to say I want to see where the division is commercial, and let's change the dates to be greater than July 12th. And so I say get report, and what it does is it now sort of goes through all of the jobs that I've got in the system, and based on that criteria, and it pulls it back into this nice Gantt chart, and I can just make it a little bit smaller so you can see it here. And what you can see is here, based on the dates that I've provided, I can sort of see the various tasks that are part and parcel of this, and I can sort of shrink these up here if I wanted to just sort of see things a little higher level, or I can expand them. And you can now start to see like these tasks are linked, so I can't create the purchase order until I get the customer quote. Well, if I don't get this customer quote until, if I don't get the customer quote until October 1, what's the impact going to be? And you can sort of see, well, that's going to have this downstream impact on things like construction, etc. That it's not going to start now till November. And the nice part is it automatically updates all the dates as well. So I don't have to update these dates by dragging and dropping these items. It's automatically adjusting those dates for me, so that I don't have to do that within the system. So again, this is a great tool for managing multiple concurrent jobs and projects to see when things are going to happen. And I've got a bunch of data in here that from setting up, preparing different demos, but you can sort of see that there's if you were to manage or have multiple projects on the go, you would sort of see all those on the go at the same time, and know when you could put various trades in to do the various jobs. So that's all I have for this particular, again, high level presentation demo. Again, happy to do a more customized presentation of the tool's capabilities if necessary. So thank you very much.